Let's talk about Nuke ACES color management. Hold down Shift and press the S key. In the color management dialog window, the default color management is set to Nuke. However, we also have OCIO color configuration options here. If we click the drop-down menu here, go to ACES, we can say we have ACES 1.2 and 1.3 options here. If we select ACES 1.2 and click OK. Now let's bring in a plate and take a look at how the Nuke color management can be applied to the plate. Press the R key and bring in the footage. In this example, I'm using the downloaded MXF format. Highlight it, open it. Now immediately you can see an error message. To fix this issue, we need to go to the Properties section, Input Transform, and Color Spaces, Input Sony Linear as Gamma 3.Cine. Click it. Now the error disappeared. With the plate still highlighted, press 1 on the keyboard and load the plate in the View 1 panel. By default, an ACES sRGB lookup table has been applied to this plate. We can also see the attributes of this plate in the Properties section. For instance, video codec, which is Sony RAW f65, gamut as gamut Cine, exposure 800, and so on and so forth. Alright, let's talk about ACES 1.3. Press the S key to bring up the project settings, then go to the Color tab. The color management by default is set to Nuke. If I switch from Nuke to OCIO, under the OCIO config option, choose ACES Studio Config 1.3. There are two options listed here for ACES 1.3. The first one is ACES CG and ACES Studio. Because we are dealing with live action footage, so we are going to use ACES 1.3 Studio configuration. Immediately you can see some error messages showing here because we are currently using Nuke ACES 1.3 color management, so we need to redefine the input color space for the plate. Double click it, go to Input Transform. From the drop-down menu, choose Color Spaces and Input Sony, then Linear as Gamma 3.Cine. Immediately you can see it shows up in the View 1 panel. Under this list here, we can see all the potential lookup tables. By default, Nuke View 1 panel used sRGB display. The next step is to press the Tab key, then bring up the color space, OCIO color space, because we are dealing with OCIO color management. Double click, and in the Properties section here, we can see the input and output. The input should be color space and input. Remember Sony Linear as Gamma 3.Cine. And the output, go to color space, ACES 2065-1. Now let's do a comparison between the original and before, after. If I zoom in, then we can clearly see original plate under the ACES sRGB is quite saturated, okay? But when we change the color space from the original one to the ACES 2065-1, we can say that looks reasonable. Before, after, before, after. In this case, we are simulating the original color space has been translated through an OCIO color space node from the original color space to ACES 2065-1. Then after that, press the W key to bring up a right node. Double click the right node. So in the properties section, the first slot, if you click this black folder here, give a proper name, JS plate and ACES 2065-1 dot %04D, because we're going to render sequence out dot EXR save. Now in the EXR options, tick the right ACES compliant EXR and go to output transform. Output transform drop down list, we need to choose color space ACES 2065-1. This will properly convert the original color space to ACES 2065-1. Then after that, render it out. After the rendering is finished, press the letter R to bring in the rendered sequence so we can double check if the color space is correct. As we can see here, green screen ACES 2065-1, click open, double click the plate. In the properties section, under the input transform, we can say by default is set to scene linear. However, we know the color space of this plate is ACES 2065-1. So from the drop-down menu, we need to go to color spaces ACES 2065-1. Alright, now press 1 to load the image. We can clearly say that's the correct color space.